My dear Wormwood, through this girl and her disgusting family, the patient is now getting to know more Christians every day, and very intelligent Christians too. For a long time, it will be quite impossible to remove spirituality from his life. Very well then, we must corrupt it. No doubt you have often practiced transforming yourself into an angel of light as a parade ground exercise. Now is the time to do it in the face of the enemy. The world and the flesh have failed us. A third power remains. And success of this third kind is the most glorious of all. A spoiled saint, a Pharisee, an inquisitor, or a magician makes better sport in hell than a mere common tyrant or debauchee. Looking around your patient's new friends, I find that the best point of attack would be the borderline between theology and politics. Several of his new friends are very much alive to the social implications of their religion. That in itself is a bad thing, but good can be made out of it. You will find that a good many Christian political writers think that Christianity began going wrong and departing from the doctrine of its founder at a very early stage. Now, this idea must be used by us to encourage once again the conception of a historical Jesus, to be found by clearing away later accretions and perversions, and then to be contrasted with the whole Christian tradition. In the last generation, we promoted the construction of such a historical Jesus on liberal and humanitarian lines. We are now putting forward a new historical Jesus on Marxian, catastrophic, and revolutionary lines. The advantages of these constructions, which we intend to change every 30 years or so, are manifold. In the first place, they all tend to direct men's devotion to something which does not exist, for each historical Jesus is unhistorical. The documents say what they say and cannot be added to. Each new historical Jesus, therefore, has to be got out of them by suppression at one point and exaggeration at another. And by that sort of guessing, brilliant is the adjective we teach humans to apply to it, on which no one would risk 10 shillings in ordinary life, but which is enough to produce a crop of new Napoleons, new Shakespeares, and new Swifts in every publisher's autumn list. In the second place, all such constructions place the importance of their historical Jesus in some peculiar theory he is supposed to have promulgated. He has to be a great man in the modern sense of the word, one standing at the terminus of some centrifugal and unbalanced line of thought, a crank bending a panacea. We thus distract men's minds from who he is and what he did. We first make him solely a teacher, and then conceal the very substantial agreement between his teachings and those of all other great moral teachers. For humans must not be allowed to notice that all great moralists are sent by the enemy not to inform men, but to remind them, to restate the primeval moral platitudes against our continual concealment of them. We make the sophists. He raises up a Socrates to answer them. Our third aim is, by these constructions, to destroy the devotional life. For the real presence of the enemy, otherwise experienced by men in prayer and sacrament, we substitute a merely probable, remote, shadowy, and uncouth figure, one who spoke a strange language and died a long time ago. Such an object cannot, in fact, be worshipped. Instead of the Creator adored by its creature, you soon have merely a leader acclaimed by a partisan, and finally, a distinguished character approved by a judicious historian. And fourthly, besides being unhistorical in the Jesus it depicts, religion of this kind is false to history in another sense. No nation and few individuals are really brought into the enemy's camp by the historical study of the biography of Jesus, simply as biography. Indeed, materials for a full biography have been withheld from men. The earliest converts were converted by a single historical fact, the resurrection, and a single theological doctrine, the redemption, operating on a sense of sin which they already had. And sin, not against some fancy new dress law produced as novelty by a great man, but against the old platitudinous universal moral law which they had been taught by their nurses and mothers. The Gospels come later and were written not to make Christians, but to edify Christians already made. The historical Jesus, then, however dangerous he may seem to be to us at some particular point, is always to be encouraged. About the general connection between Christianity and politics, our position is more delicate. Certainly we do not want men to allow their Christianity to flow over into their political life, For the establishment of anything like a really just society would be a major disaster. On the other hand, we do want, and want very much, to make men treat Christianity as a means, preferably, of course, as a means to their own advancement, but failing that as a means to anything, even to social justice. The thing to do is to get a man at first to value social justice as a thing which the enemy demands, and then work on him to the stage at which he values Christianity because it may produce social justice. For the enemy will not be used as a convenience. Men or nations who think they can revive the faith in order to make a good society might just as well think they can use the stairs of heaven as a shortcut to the nearest chemist's shop. Fortunately, it is quite easy to coax humans around this little corner. Only today I have found a passage in a Christian writer where he recommends his own version of Christianity on the ground that only such a faith can outlast the death of old cultures and the birth of new civilizations. You see the little rift? Believe this, not because it is true, but for some other reason. That's the game. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. How many of you guys have read the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis? Just a few of you. That is one of the many letters in this book. In the Screwtape Letters, what we have here is Wormwood is a junior demon, like a frontline tormenting demon, assigned to a particular human. His uncle's name is Screwtape. He's a more senior demon. In the hierarchy of hell, he would be a lower demon because everything's inverted in hell, even though in our world, he would be a higher demon. So when we read the Screwtape Letters, it's kind of tough to get into, but we have to understand really quickly when we're reading it that what Screwtape says is the opposite of truth. So when Screwtape here is talking about the enemy, who's he talking about? He's talking about God, absolutely. He's talking about God. So everything is the opposite. If he says it's bad for Christians, then it's good. So he talks a lot about, well, get them to concentrate on something else other than Jesus. I highly recommend reading this book. C.S. Lewis has quite a few Christian books out there. He has Mere Christianity, which is always recommended. C.S. Lewis also wrote the Chronicles of Narnia series. I know a lot of you have read that. It's an allegory for Jesus, if you didn't know that much already, but it is. So go ahead and read some C.S. Lewis. It'll do you some good. And with Halloween coming up on Friday, I wanted to talk about something Halloween related. We did this last year talking about ghosts. I actually plan on talking about ghosts at our service Wednesday. Wednesdays at 7, be there. It's a fun service. I know we don't always talk about worship as being fun, but it's fun. It's very much Jesus-centered. Don't think that we're not centered on Jesus. I will never do a worship that isn't centered on Jesus. But we have fun. There's usually a game for our high school and middle school kids that one of the guys puts on. That game is usually safe. Haven't had any serious injuries in those games yet, I don't think so. But Wednesday we're going to talk about ghosts. But today, though, I want to talk about demons. When it comes to demons, when it comes to the idea of Satan or the devil being active in the world today, people will often take one of two extreme stances on it. Either people will say, it's not real. Demons don't exist. Demons no longer exist. They were something at the time of Jesus, but I don't know, they disappeared or they went away or something. They're no longer an influence on people today. Or people take the other extreme and they blame demons, they blame Satan, they blame the devil on everything that goes wrong. Anytime something bad happens, it was demons. Anytime evil occurs, it was demons. And as with a lot of things, I really think that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of all this. There's no doubt in my mind that evil exists today. We see it all the time. We see this all the time. I have no doubt that some of this is direct influence of our enemy, Satan, the influence of demons on people's lives. But is every sin committed due to the temptation of our enemy? No, not at all. James addresses this in James chapter 1, starting in verse 13. He says, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Of course, James is going to echo what Jesus says. And back in Matthew, a couple chapters before our reading from today, Jesus is talking about what defiles a person. And in this section in chapter 15, the Pharisees are upset because the disciples were eating without washing their hands. Now, for us today, we're like, well, yeah, they're eating. They should have washed their hands, right? It's a hygiene thing for us. I was on a road trip years ago, and I stopped at a gas station. I was really hungry, and this gas station had a one of those. Is it Chester's Chicken? Is that the gas station one? I can't keep them track. I was excited that I was going to get gas station chicken. That's how hungry I was at that point. And so I go in and I use the restroom, and there was someone else in the restroom, and that person left the restroom without washing their hands, and that was the person behind the counter at the chicken stand. I did not get chicken. That was gross. So for us, it's an issue of hygiene. But for the Pharisees, it wasn't so much about hygiene. They didn't know about germs and all that stuff back in the day. For the Pharisees, it's about the tradition of the elders. What's the tradition of the elders? It's going to be the law, is what we're talking about here. So the issue is that if their hands are dirty and they touch food, then the food becomes dirty, and they eat the food, and it's not an issue of disease, it's an issue that their body now becomes defiled. It is ceremonially unclean. And the Pharisees are upset by that. And the disciples then go to Jesus and they talk to Jesus about it. In Matthew 15, starting in verse 17, Jesus says this, "Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person. But eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. Out of the heart come evil thoughts." As I'm sitting here, this would be one of those great verses to take out of context if you don't want to wash your hands, right? It's like, but Jesus says these are not what defile a person. Eating unwashed hands does not defile a person. I don't have to wash my hands. Great way to take a verse out of context. That's obviously not what he's talking about. Out of the heart come evil thoughts. Bad things are not always from demons, not always from Satan. Our sinful desires come from our own hearts, at least at times. Of course, we are tempted by our enemy at times. Peter tells us this in his first letter. Peter says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." In both Matthew and Luke, we get a detailed description of the devil coming to Jesus in the wilderness and tempting him to accept worldly things and worldly praise. And of course, Jesus there resists the devil, as Jesus is always able to do. But still, we have this example of the devil actively at work in the world, trying to get people to follow him and reject God. So we have these temptations of evil, the work of demons to get us to do things counter to God's way of life, tempting us to sin. Thinking about our story from today about a demon-possessed boy, in the Gospels, this is a really fairly routine thing that Jesus does, driving out demons from people who are possessed. So, of course, we have the one that we've talked about already, of our boy that was possessed. Let me read you a few others, a few selections. Here's one from Matthew chapter 8. Matthew chapter 8, verses 16 and 17. "When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, to Jesus, and he drove out the spirits with a word and healed all the sick." A very well-known one, I think a lot of us have heard from a little bit later in chapter 8 of Matthew. "When he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. 'What do you want with us, Son of God?' they shouted. 'Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?' The demons begged Jesus, 'If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs.' He said to them, 'Go.' So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. In chapter 9, verse 32, while they were going out, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." Matthew chapter 12. Then they brought him a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute, and Jesus healed him so that he could both talk and see. So these are just a few examples here in Matthew's gospel. Mark and Luke also talk about these events. They talk about some others as well. But the question is, does this kind of thing still happen today? Well, that can be a bit of a matter of opinion or experience, of course. And we need to be careful not to assign a diagnosis of demon possession on someone that isn't really afflicted by demons. In our story today, if you remember the description of what happens to our boy, chapter 17, verse 15, "Lord, have mercy on my son," he said. "He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water." We read in the description very specifically the boy is having seizures. So many of these descriptions talk about what could be seizures. They talk about things that could be issues of mental health. And today we'll usually go to that diagnosis first, and rightfully so. We should go to that. If we're serious about helping someone, we need to know what's actually wrong with them. If we say someone is possessed by a demon but they have epilepsy, they're not likely to get the right treatment for it. But if we say someone is suffering from mental health issues and they're actually being tormented by a demon, they're not going to get the right help either. There's not enough Ritalin in the world that can drive out a demon. But as with medicine, the right diagnosis is vital to provide the correct treatment. A lot of times when we think about demon possession, the first thing that comes to mind, you're probably already thinking about it, the movie The Exorcist. You guys seen that one? Maybe you've read the book. It was a book first. I've seen the movie once. I will never watch it again. It scares me too much. What scares me so much about it is it's based on a true story, if you guys weren't aware of that. It is based on a true story. Naturally, they take cinematic liberties with the movie on the story. In the movie, it's a little girl who's possessed. In real life, it was a 14-year-old boy. I know there are some other differences in the story and the movie as well. Now, skeptics who have looked at this case, the real case, not the movie case, trying to say, well, he wasn't possessed by a demon. Some posit that the boy wasn't possessed, that he was just a brat. I actually saw this online. That's their explanation, which seems like a bit of a stretch to me. I don't know. I mean, I've seen some kids that are kind of wild, but in really terrible behavior, but I don't ever think I've said that boy's got a demon in him. Now that I think about Breakout, though. No, I'm kidding. There are claims in this case, in the Exorcist case, that the boy, whose name is Roland, when he was growing up, he used to use a Ouija board with his aunt. And many believe that the Ouija board was this conduit for demonic possession. Now, I know a lot of people have played with Ouija boards, with spirit boards. I remember my grandmother, my Roman Catholic grandmother, had one and showed it to us as kids. Those things are creepy. If you ever used one, I think a lot of you guys probably have. Well, it's just a game and everything. Okay, but stay away from them. Seriously. Stay far, far, far away from that kind of stuff. If they're fake, if they're not real, it doesn't matter too much, but what you're going to get out of that is an answer that you want, whether you're right or wrong. So if you're guiding the answer, you're going to get the answer you want. But if they're real, then the answers are straight up demonic. And do you know what those answers are going to do? They're going to manipulate you into doing not the right thing, but something else. So stay away from those. Just get rid of them, burn them, whatever. Just stay away from them. The Exorcist version of demonic possession, the one that we tend to think of, that's a really showy, a flashy version of it, if you will. It's a very outward public version of a demonic possession. And it doesn't seem like that's very common, a very common thing to happen. Maybe it happens more than I realize, I'm not sure. But that doesn't seem like it's quite as common. What's likely much more common is this demonic influence like C.S. Lewis describes in the Screwtape Letters, which is just this more subtle poking and prodding and tempting us. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this more subtle temptation. We'll look at one in the book here in a bit. But I want to start with one that's a song by a band named Casting Crowns. You guys know Casting Crowns? Probably my favorite Christian band. Got to see them in concert a few years ago. If I remember correctly, they're the band for their church. It'd be like if our praise team during the week was out touring the country and selling millions of albums, and then we came on Sundays and we played. That's Casting Crowns. How cool is that? You go to the church and, oh yeah, our praise team is Casting Crowns. That'd be awesome. Should we do that? Go on tour? No? Okay, no, all right. Does no one want to hear us? All right. I don't know, maybe we should set that up. So these guys, Casting Crowns, they have a song called Slow Fade, if you're familiar with the song Slow Fade. And it talks about this idea. It talks about this idea that none of us are going to go from regularly attending church, being a believer, or at least close to being a believer. I struggle to believe that someone who truly believes in Jesus as Savior is going to completely and permanently reject God. It's a little bit of the Calvinist in me. But the song and the truth is, somebody isn't going to go one day following Jesus and the next day completely rejecting God. It's a gradual process. It is a slow fade. Some of the lyrics are this. I'm going to read a little bit to you. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. It's the second glance that ties your hands as darkness pulls the strings. Be careful, little feet, where you go, for it's the little feet behind you that are sure to follow. So the suggestion here, and it's very true, isn't just that we're tempted, isn't just that we might slip sometimes. It's that our behaviors are an example to those around us, which is very, very true. A few more lyrics. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. When flattery leads to compromise, the end is always near. Be careful, little lips, what you say, for empty words and promises lead broken hearts astray. Again, there's the temptation on us, then there's our behavior showing or influencing someone else. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white have turned to gray. Thoughts invade, choices made. A price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. What we're talking about here is it can be a lot of seemingly little things that add up. And then we slip further and further and further from God and closer and closer and closer to that demon assigned to torment us. I think a really great example to use here is the idea that it isn't sinful to notice the physical beauty in someone. It isn't sinful to notice the physical beauty in someone. But when you turn around and look at them again with those eyes, you guys know the eyes I'm talking about. When you look at a person with those eyes, that's when sin creeps in. So it's the accumulation of these seemingly little things that are easy for us to dismiss as not that big of a deal every once in a while. But eventually they add up and turn into bigger things. But I feel there's an even greater threat that pulls us away from God. It's something that C.S. Lewis talks about in the Screwtape Letters. I'm going to read another paragraph from that in just a moment. But it's something that I like to call Jesus and. C.S. Lewis calls it Christianity and. It's a situation where Jesus isn't enough. Now, people aren't going to look at it that way. People don't look at it that way. We think Jesus is enough, but sometimes, man, we like to co-opt all kinds of things into Christianity. Let me read to you how C.S. Lewis puts it in this. Remember, this is a letter from a senior demon to a direct line tormenting demon, teaching his nephew how to tempt a human. My dear Wormwood, the real trouble about the set your patient is living in is that it is merely Christian. They all have individual interests, of course, but the bond remains mere Christianity. What we want, if men become Christians at all, is to keep them in the state of mind I call Christianity and. You know, Christianity and the crisis, Christianity and the new psychology, Christianity and the new order, Christianity and faith healing, Christianity and psychical research, Christianity and vegetarianism, Christianity and spelling reform. If they must be Christians, let them at least be Christians with a difference. Substitute for the faith itself some fashion with a Christian coloring. Work on their horror of the same old thing. Substitute for the faith itself some fashion with a Christian coloring. Today we very much have Christianity and Jesus and our political candidate, Jesus and our political party, Jesus and our country. It gives our preferred thing, whatever that preferred thing is, it gives it a divine appointment. My preferred candidate for office is there because God put them there. My political party is best because they're the party of Jesus. My football team won yesterday because God made it so. Kind of sounds ridiculous to say that about our football team, doesn't it? But how many of us have done that with something of this world? With a thing, with an issue. Maybe you saved up a long time to buy the car of your dreams, and it gets a scratch. And you're devastated because it got a little scratch on it. Could be that. And that's what Screwtape is trying to say. If someone is going to follow Jesus, make sure that they don't follow just Jesus. Make sure that Jesus is attached to something else, so that when that something else is questioned or disparaged in some way, it is a perceived attack on God himself. I know I've fallen for this at points in my life. The truth, however, is that Jesus is enough. We don't need Jesus and. We don't need to attach Jesus to our projects or causes to give those things validity. Or, as some may think, attach Jesus to our projects to give Jesus validity. Jesus is enough. Jesus is not a means to an end. Jesus is the end. Jesus is not a way to salvation. Jesus is the way to salvation because Jesus is salvation. Going into this upcoming week, I want you guys to ask yourselves that question. Think about this. Really think about this. Really consider this. Ask this of God and pray for him to answer you. Have I attached Jesus to something I shouldn't have? Have I attached Jesus to something I shouldn't have? Have I elevated something of the world to a divine status because I attached that thing to Jesus? Do I need Jesus and? Or is Jesus alone enough for me? Our enemy is active. Don't think that because we're living in the 21st century that demons have stopped trying. There are demons working to lure us away from our loving Creator. To them, he's their enemy. But don't obsess over that evil either, because we have a Savior. And to us, he is the source of all that is good. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, And after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with a breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Do you know Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior? Maybe you need to reevaluate your relationship with Him. Maybe you've been focused on Jesus and. Let Jesus be enough for you. Say yes to only Jesus. Dedicate yourself to Him today. Rededicate yourself to only Him today if you need to.